I would help them. What else was she still alive? Please get her. I didn't. They didn't let me out.
Hello, hello, there we go. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Yes. You all just witnessed the final performance of Signature Theater's production of Twilight, Los Angeles, 1992. My name is Drew Shade. I am the founder and artistic director of Broadway Black, which is a platform that highlights African Americans on and off the Broadway stage. And I am honored and privileged to be here with the two dynamic icons, Anna Deavere Smith and Dr. Cornel West. Come on. Y'all got more than that. Y'all got more than that. They've done so much for us. And I would be lying if I say I wasn't a little nervous to be in such the presence of greatness like this. So please forgive me as I find the words to enter into dialogue with these two great minds. I am blown away by this production. Twilight, Los Angeles is a solo performance play, usually performed by Anna Deavere Smith, and this was reimagined for this ensemble cast, and there's so many elements that I want to dive into. But I first want to begin with Ms. Deavere Smith. Can you talk to us a little bit about what it's like to reimagine something that's already been laid in foundation for years, a number of years? What has that been like for you to rework this production for these particular people?
Well, it's just a process of meeting them. Where are they? They're up there somewhere.
Yeah. Yes, up there.
There they are.
Yes.
Meeting them and being in auditions, which were a very long process. So, it's just being with the people, I would say. That's the main thing.
Yes. And one of the things that I noticed, and this is something I know of you as well, that you perform barefoot. And this production, all of the artists performed barefoot as well. Was that an homage to you? What is the significance behind performing barefoot?
Oh, well, I'm very grateful that the director, Tavi Magar, did decide to do that, and also the costume designer, that they went with that. I mean, for me, and I don't know, Brother West, you may have something to say about this. I've always wanted to have my foot close to the ground, to get energy from the ground. Also, there is an abstraction, because I'm not really any of these people. So that, I was thinking about the work I did with Alvin Ailey Dance Company and, modern dance. And I went down to, years later after making that, I think I wasn't even really doing this kind of performing anymore, to Mother Emanuel. And I had a chance to talk to the pastor who was the woman pastor whose name is slipping me right now, after, the shootings. And we had a little talk, and she talked about how when she gets behind the pulpit, the first thing she does is take her shoes off, because she feels that having her foot on the ground made her closer to God for preaching.
Yeah. That's powerful, because there's a rooting and a planting in storytelling, especially when your feet are bare. I think we also hear people want to sing flat-footed, and without shoes, and that gets us really to the soul and the core of what we're trying to interpret. And I think that was very much so seen here today. Talking about this story, this real life verbatim course of events that we witnessed today too. Can you talk to us a little about Cornel West, Dr. Cornel West? What came back to you after hearing your own words, especially with the ensemble saying them all? That was the first time that they've done that as well. So an ensemble saying your words from an interview from over 20 years ago. What does that draw up anything for you?
I forgot I said it, but I wish I would have said it, but I guess I did say it because my dear sister laid it out. But I just want to begin by saluting an artistic genius, a spiritual giant, empowering force for good in the country and the world in such a grim and dim moment. This is very, very important because she's part of a tradition of a people who have been chronically hated for 400 years and keep dishing out love warriors and freedom fighters and wounded healers and joy spreaders. That's who she is. So she's this mighty wave in a great ocean of a people, of Anna and Deavere, her mother and father and so forth. And that's very important for me because all of us in this very, very dark moment have to be able to situate and locate ourselves in a tradition that has everything to do with integrity, honesty, decency, the kind of generosity. It's radical empathy, radical hospitality, radical love you see on the stage, getting inside of the skin of others, getting a sense of what their wounds are like, and then allowing the anthem of black people lift every voice. Every voice of every corner of the culture is lifted. It's not lift every echo. So we live in a culture of joyless quest for insatiable pleasure with echo chambers being expressed. But when you lift your voice like a jazz man or a blues woman, or a great artist like Sister Anna, we get some hope. And that's what I get every time I see your artistry. We think about our years in Cambridge together with the civic dialogue and so forth. I was telling that to my president, my beloved president of Unity Theological Seminary, Serene Jones. We got my assistant dean here, Nicole Miranda, her precious mother and father. It's her mother's birthday, actually, so that's a beautiful thing. And then, is Sister Loretta still here?
Is Sister Loretta? She is still here.
Well, where is she? Where is she? There she is. There's our dear sister, Attorney General. Give it up for Sister Loretta. Give it up for Sister Loretta. That's true. She's come out of the same tradition on the chocolate side of town, told in the Baptist churches, if the kingdom of God is within you, then everywhere you go, you ought to leave a little heaven behind. And leaving that heaven behind is what we get in this artistry. It's what we get in this artistry, and it makes all the difference in the world, and it makes it a human question. It's not a function of your skin pigmentation. It's a function of your spiritual formation and ethical cultivation and courageous action. And for some of us, it's got something to do with Jesus and divine connection, but we won't get into that right now. However you get it, you're going to need some courage, vision, cutting against the grain, because the democracy is about gone. It's about gone. With all the organized hatred and institutionalized greed and routinized fear and paranoia, you can't have a democracy like that. Your public space is evacuated. There's no trust of any citizen vis-a-vis each other that can generate the kind of movement that's at work in what our artist is putting forward. And artists are always the vanguard of the species. They authorize an alternative reality. That's what Shelley had in mind. Poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. He wasn't talking about versifiers, talking about human beings who deploy their imagination and empathy to authorize a better world and then encourage folk to fight for it. And once you lose that, you just got spiritual decay. You just got more decrepitude, and it becomes survival of the slickest. And the 11th commandment, thou shalt not get caught, becomes the way in which people live their lives. That's where we are right now. And that's why her artistry is so crucial, fundamental.
You also talked about Toni Morrison and Antoine Chekhov.
Lord have mercy.
And those were the artists at that particular time in 1992 that were very impactful and were speaking to the voice of the people and what you thought was the way to go. Is there anyone since that time that you think, beyond Miss Anna Deavere Smith, that is doing the same thing that Toni Morrison and Antoine Chekhov were getting to the core of people and the humanity? Are there any other artists?
This generation?
Of this generation.
Oh, well, you probably know better than me. I like Sister Susan Laurie Parks' work.
Yes.
Oh, she goes down. She goes down. Very, very much so. There's some artists. Every generation is going to dish out something. You know what I mean? Our problem is that we live in the age of the spectacle, you see, so that people think they're dished out to be seen rather than shine. That's why I like Twilight's last words. He said, he's a human being, he's the light. Fannie Lou Hammond used to say what? This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Bootsy wrote a song. We co-wrote it together this summer. Bootsy Collins, a great funk master, called Stars. Stars are not made for the red carpet. They're made to shine. So the younger generation needs to understand that even when you have this great talent and these gifts, you cultivate the gifts to give it to others and serve. The least of these is not to give attention to yourself so you become the spectacle. No. And that's a challenge. It's a major challenge. We live in the most commodified culture in the history of the world. The most marketized culture in the history of the world. So it's all spectacle, it's all image, it's all PR reflection.
And I think that, particularly with this piece, it's such a star power piece, if you will. Mr. Deavere Smith, can you tell me a little bit about what it was like to not be the star and cultivate this? And I know you working with this ensemble was different, but what was special about making an ensemble piece beyond a solo
Well,
piece?
the work that I do, which is to, basically my grandfather said, if you say a word often enough, it becomes you. And I've been going around America with a tape recorder since the late 70s trying to become America word for word. And in defiance of growing up in a segregated culture, segregated Baltimore, Maryland, more segregated probably now than it was then. And so, you know, it was always meant to be for other actors, to do this work. That was the dream. And I just didn't think I knew how to raise enough money to do that. And I just remembered that I was a mimic as a child and thought, well, while I'm refining this, I'll just do it all myself. And then the first one that got known, which was number 13, Fires in the Mirror, you know, I was then so-called known for doing this. But the process was always meant to be for a group of actors like these wonderful human beings up here in the back, who I love, and they know I'm crazy about them.
And they did a beautiful job. Let's give it up for the actors. So I want to dive into the message of this. It's so relevant to the time that we're in, especially with the Rittenhouse verdict that we just had, that could also incite some anger and some wanting of justice. And how this piece particularly feeds to the core of who we are. We're still trying to find the humanity within each other. And how do you think this has impacted these audiences? How do you think this is serving the audiences right now from 1992?
Well, I think, first of all, these audiences, the audiences of people who come here, who give up an evening or an afternoon and hours to come and be with us, number one, I would like, particularly the actors in the back, to give it up to this audience. Because we're nothing without you. We're nothing without you. And I think we are still rolling from the murder of George Floyd. And, so, and going all the way back to Trayvon Martin, and certainly before then, but this long, long line of assaults that we have watched together, that I think that I don't know how people process that, but it's really about trying to put something up here that will allow everybody to process this in their own way, and the assault on Asian Americans, and what's been happening with immigration, that all of these things about colored people, that there's a mix that happens when the audience is here, and our white brothers and sisters as well, right? How do we get to this point where we find places where we can gather together? We wish and hope and rely on the arts and universities, and we've said before that our places of worship are the most segregated times, 11 o'clock on Sunday morning. So we need to find lots of places where people can come and process. But what do you think, brother, about that?
I think you're telling the truth. The condition of truth is to allow suffering to speak and transfigure that suffering into some language that can touch people's souls in such a way they're willing to bear witness to something bigger than their ego. But that's just a perennial challenge for the species. I mean, that's just every generation has to deal with that. Because we live at a time for young folk where they are rightly questioning the very capacity of the species to avoid self-destruction. You see, we had that with nuclear catastrophe, it wasn't ecological catastrophe when we would come along. You see what I mean? So that cast another kind of cloud. We got some wonderful students from Skidmore here, young students, wrestling with that. And then in addition, you got the wealth inequality and organized greed, especially at the top. And then in addition, you got white supremacy. And in addition, you got the degrading of Arabs and Muslims and Jews and Palestinians and gays and lesbians and trans and indigenous peoples and patriarchy operating. In addition, you got an American empire still dropping drones on innocent people. It's just the peak of the militaristic foreign policy. So all of that has to be taken into consideration because our world is so globalized now. You can't avoid the ways in which we're connected with the other 191 nations in the world, the way in which as a species we could go under if the ecological catastrophe increases. And you're the younger generation. What do you think about that?
Well, I like to think I'm the younger. Thank you. Thank you so much. I like to think I'm the younger generation. I appreciate that. I thank you. I do want to say, though, in connecting with people and talking with people, that is important. And that's something that I noticed, too, that you changed with this piece, the Thanksgiving dinner party, was where they actually got a chance to talk, it seemed, to each other. Can you talk a little bit about the process of that, what you thought of how that came to be?
Well, isn't that great that you call it Thanksgiving?
Am I the only one that got the Thanksgiving?
No, so I interviewed 320 people. And in one of the productions that I did a production in LA and a production at the Public Theater, one on Broadway, and then we made one for the road that went to a variety of places. And one of the places it went was to San Francisco. And after the San Francisco performance one night, Alice Waters, who Elena portrayed for us, and a great chef, and really started the way we eat now. She really did start this farm-to-table thing. A lot of people get credit for it. And after the performance, a friend of hers took me out to dinner with a couple other people, and Chef Waters, Alice Waters, Sister Alice, and she could not speak. She just sat, like sort of the way you saw Elena. And I wanted to put her in the show. And that really inspired the idea of a dinner table where the least likely people would assemble, strangers, because these are, over the course of a year and a half that I did these interviews, and out of those 320, I just picked, and that's about 400 hours, I just picked, these people to see how I could cause them to be making some sense, even though they never even met, that it was absolutely disparate. And that is something that I hope is a suggestion to our audience. Not that I think, as we did in the 90s, and Brother West, that's when we met each other in the 90s, that this is anything any more about a conversation about race. That is not going to get us anywhere. There are things that have to happen, but nonetheless, there is, in most religions, an idea about hospitality, right? Which is, how do you greet the stranger? How do you welcome the stranger in to your table and with grace and not want anything back, right? At that moment that Alice Waters says, to give and not, does it all have to be transactional? And that's what politics is, right? Most of the things we do are transactional. But the idea of hospitality, how do you greet the stranger? And you have a chance. Is it that you're going to embrace the stranger? Are you going to welcome the stranger to your table? Or are you going to kill the stranger? So that's what the table is.
Right, because that feels dangerous, bringing the stranger into the comforts of your home or the comforts of your safe space. And so that can cause alarm for some people. And I think that's why that particular dinner party conversation was so important, because it was the least likely of people to have dialogue. And it felt like that they were able to have a solid discourse amongst each other without falling over, without falling out of the idea of what they actually wanted to achieve. What did they actually want to have happen?
You know, it's very interesting that the great James Baldwin, the genius, come out of Harlem. His last book was The Welcome Table, that he never published. Because he had a welcome table in his crib, in his house, right outside of Paris. And it was a whosoever will, let him come. It was building on the genius of Hebrew scripture, which is the spreading of Hesed, that steadfast love, that loving kindness, the orphan, widow, fatherless, motherless, the 20 references to embracing the stranger, Leviticus 19, love thy neighbor. And then Jesus, love thy neighbor. Then we can go on to other subsequent figures in that sense. So that welcome table overlaps with Baldwin going back to, and of course, I mean, prophetic legacy of Jerusalem have no monopoly on radical hospitality, but you'll find it in Hebrew scripture if you look close enough. It's there. And you find it in other great religious traditions as well, you see. And when it comes to we Christians, oh my God, don't spend too much time looking at our behavior, but it's in our text. It's in our text. Even love your enemy. Even love your enemy. When I was down in Charlottesville, and these people coming at us tooth and nail, cussing us out, gonna crush us, and so forth. Brother West, how come you call us brother all the time? I said, because Jesus loves you just like he loves me. They said, oh, that's kind of strange. I said, it's very strange because you choose to be a gangster. And I'm wrestling with my gangster proclivities, but I'm a redeemed sinner. So that we're still on a human continuum in that sense. And it's that kind of humility and fallibility that become the precondition for some serious dialogue at that welcome table. But if people don't feel as if they're trusted, they don't feel as if you have any interest in them whatsoever, then it's not going to be a dialogue at the welcome table. It's going to be swords. It's going to be cursing, which you see on so much of the internet and so forth. That's part of the spiritual decay and moral decadence that you see in the culture that is running amok. So that welcome table is a countervailing force, counter-hegemonic force. It goes against the hatred, the greed, the domination, the oppression, and so forth. Because these moments of interruption are all we have as a species. Most of the history of the species of hatred, domination, and subjugation of various forms. And all you have are these moments of interruption and disruption, and that's where democracies can come forward. And that's why they're so rare in human history. That's why they tend not to last too long. Because it takes unbelievable courage to criticize yourself. Courage to enter public space without humiliation. Courage to raise your voice and not just be an echo. Once you lose that courage, then all you've got is a gangsterized society. Not just polarized the way corporate media says. No, it's gangsterized. It's gangsterized. Not even hypocritical. Hypocrisy is the tribute that vice pays them virtue. Because if you're a hypocrite, at least you know you got standards. It's true. But when you're a gangster, you have no standards. That's where we're headed. That's fascism. That's American-style fascism across the board. And that's very much where we're headed. And Trump is just a sign and symbol. Because they got other folk waiting in the wings. And so when we have a play like this, given all the joy and all the sense of community, life and death is at stake. And that's when you have great artists like this sister here, we recognize just how precious her work and her artistry is as part of a longer tradition. Because we could have just had John Coltrane's Love Supreme and ended the whole thing.
Well, that's not a bad idea either.
Same tradition.
That's not a bad idea.
Well, before we open our welcome table and you find the courage to ask a question, this is a question that I love to ask every person that I interview. Can you tell me what you want us to walk away with after seeing this? And Dr. Cornel, can you tell us what are you walking away with after this? And then we'll open the microphone to questions.
Well, I just am more interested in what people are bringing. And so, therefore, I cannot predict what they're walking away with, because I know every single person in here brought something. They may not have even may have come with somebody and didn't even know what they were going to see. And if something happened where they had a moment of connection and reflection and reorganization, which could lead to some kind of transformation that they would like to have, not here, but as a accretion. My mentor, Studs Terkel, talked about, I asked him, what's the defining moment of American history? He said, there ain't no defining moment of American history. It's an accretion of moments that bring us to where we are now. So I understand if some tiny, tiny thing happens here, for one of you, itsy, bitsy, witsy, whether it's cognitive or emotional, I hope it's in the bigger sea of moments that you have in your life. So I don't think about what people are going to walk away with. I just hope they came in with something and that something got remixed in the time that they were with us.
Amen to that. Thank you. And Dr. West.
Well, just very briefly, got what I want to hear before I got to say, but it's not a matter of just getting woke. I tell my young brothers and sisters all the time, if you stay woke, you're going to suffer from insomnia. It's true. You got to be fortified. This is not a choice of a lifetime. It's a question of what kind of human being you want to be. Are you going to be a freedom fighter? So you got to stay fortified. For me, it's Ephesians 6. Put on the whole armor. Get ready. People get ready. That's Curtis Mayfield, isn't it? Train to come. Don't need no ticket. Just get on board. That's what I'm talking about. Stay fortified. Ready. Mind, heart, soul, body, laughter, style, incongruity, and contradiction that you are. Just keep being fortified as a force for good. And that's what I leave with, more fortified.
I love that.
I love that too. Awesome. Give it up one more time for these two dynamic artists. We're going to take just a few questions. Let me take my glasses off to actually see out here. If we have anybody with a question, I would love to. We'll start right here. Yes, sir.
So I'm really intrigued by the rhetoric that...
Oh.
Got a union student. He's in my class on Bonhoeffer and Ball when I said, love you, baby.
So first and foremost, I first encountered your work, Fires in the Mirror, 7 years ago in undergraduate class. I thought it was really profound. Thank you for that. And then secondly, I'm really intrigued by the rhetoric that President Bush employed in discussing the incident. He said, order must be restored. And I was wondering to myself, was there order to begin with at all if such a trial result was affected in the first place? So maybe there's this question of mobs and riots, so-called. I don't prefer that rhetoric, but maybe they're all about trying to establish, bring into being this order that never existed in the first place.
Well, I think you've said it. I think, you've said it. That's a great provocative question for everybody in the audience. Was there order in the first place? Was there ever an American dream? Was there ever a common good? All of these things that we assume. So thank you from Union Theological Seminary. Personally, I think education shouldn't be about answers. It should be about questions. And I feel the same way about art, right? All art starts with a question. And so you've given this audience a great question. Was there order in the first place?
Right. There was certainly order, but not enough justice.
Yes.
You had order under slavery. You had order under Jim Crow and Jane Crow. The problem was it was an unjust order. That's the difference. Fascism will make the trains run on time. The crime rate's going to go real low. And certain folk going to feel real safe. And some of us will have our heads cut off. That's order too. But it's wrong. It's unjust. It's immoral.
We'll go to the microphone here.
Hello. Thank you. Let me just breathe, please. So I want to thank you, Ms. Smith. I'm a performer. I'm an artist, and your work often reminds me of the why of that, so thank you. And Dr. West, I'm also a first-year seminarian, and I was literally up at midnight to make sure I could get into your class for next semester, so I look forward to meeting you. And I have a multiple-part question about trauma. And my question for you, Ms. Smith, is when you are in this work for the many years, how do you care for yourself, especially when you're preparing these performances and being in these voices all day, every day? And further, how, when you extend the process to a cast, do you care for the cast or care for each other as a cast? And further, what is your responsibility as an artist to care for the audience? I'll share that I saw your piece on prisons a few years ago, and it was powerful, and it was hard. And I had to encounter videos that I had chosen not to click on or ever watch and witness in order to care for myself, and then I had to. And so my final part of the question is, it felt even harder in a predominantly white audience and under the white gaze. And do you think that there's space in theater to create all Black performances? Or Dr. West, in your work at Union, do you think we could get some Black affinity space with you, and not to avoid the community or the table to undo segregation in the ways that you've been discussing, but just to spend some time with this content outside of the white gaze? Thank you.
Well, in terms of, it's a very complex question. And it's a question about now and before. And in terms of how I take care of myself, I live a life when I'm performing that's away. I get to the theater at 2 o'clock in the afternoon for an 8 o'clock show. I meditate. I am quiet. When I'm obviously also when I'm performing alone, you know, I did this whole show alone. There's a lot of material that I have to remember, in addition to not knowing what will happen when I'm up here, because I believe that the words will find me. You know, the words will come to me. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. So that, you know, that could be a book. But I would say that, you know, I eat a certain way. I don't go out ever. I have to, you know, take care of my voice, and, you know, I pray that I have producers who understand that, right? And a community of people who understand it. In terms of the question of affinity groups, I think you might have something to say about that, because there is a movement in the theater right now that I think addresses that.
Right, so I run a platform called Broadway Black, and that is pretty much our whole mission, is to get people that normally would not feel welcome in the theater to come to the theater. We create individual nights. We do Black theater nights. We did a BIPOC theater night for this particular play. So we do and cultivate community engagement events specifically for that. And there are several people beyond myself, beyond Broadway Black, that are doing things of that nature. There's Chichi and Yanwu. There's Marcia Pendleton. There are a lot of people that work in the theater, especially for off-Broadway and Broadway shows, to create spaces for us to be able to witness things and experience things without, because it can alter the way that you view the show. It can alter your mood. It can alter your attention, because sometimes I look around like, why is that funny? Who is laughing in here? So I understand wholeheartedly. So please follow us, get with us. We send out newsletters and emails about all of our community engagement events. But awesome, yeah. Awesome. Did we address all the...
I look forward to you being in the class asking those kind of questions. Very profound, very profound. But I think the important thing is that we all have to be jazz-like in our multi-contextual orientation. All of us are in a variety of different contexts. There's some contexts I just want my family. There's other contexts I just want Black folk. Barbershop, church, a lot of other things. I mean, the church is open to white folk, but you got to be ready when you come in. Got to be ready. But there's nothing wrong with that. But it's not segregationist in content and character. It is contextual. You've got all Catholic, all Jewish, all gay, all lesbian. All of these contexts play a very important role in our lives. You don't get stuck in them. And you try to be the same human being with integrity across the context, no matter what it is. So I look forward to the all-Black context at Union, and then the multiracial context, and so forth and so on. In the end, though, it's going to require multiracial solidarity. to deal with the multi-layered catastrophe that we talk about. There's no way out. There has to be some kind of principled coalition of people of integrity who have to change the levels of injustice on the various levels here.
Well, we thank you all for being a solid audience and staying here with us and witnessing this conversation. Give it up one more last time for Dr. Cornel West and Deavere Smith. Phenomenal. Thank you all so much for joining us. It has been a pleasure. I'm Drew Shade of Broadway Black. You all know what it is.
Salute the artists, the actors.
Yes. Give it up for the actors. Hug on them, love on them. It's the last show. Thank you all so much.